Why was she always the one watching the exits? Sarah Martinez sat in the corner booth of the cafe, her laptop glowing with half-finished lines of her graduate thesis. Outside, the city moved lazily beneath the golden fall light. Inside, it was quiet, almost too quiet. A mother rocked her baby by the window, two suited men murmured near the door, and Mrs. Chen, the owner, flipped through her newspaper behind the counter. A normal Tuesday, but Sarah's back wasn't to the door. It never was. She had chosen the seat that let her see everything, everyone. Old habits, the kind that don't die no matter how many times you tell yourself you've moved on. The coffee beside her was black, untouched long enough to cool. She tapped a few keys, trying to focus on the paragraph about post-traumatic stress, her research project, the thing that mattered now, helping veterans transition, helping them find footing when the world stopped making sense. She knew the words weren't abstract. They were her reflection. Every page carried her shadow, though she didn't tell anyone that. Not Jessica, her civilian friend from psychology class, not her professors. Not even Mrs. Chen, who reminded her so much of the grandmother she'd lost while deployed. She had promised herself this life was new, quiet, safe, ordinary. She liked that word, ordinary. It was a shield she carried as fiercely as she once carried a rifle. But then the bell above the cafe door chimed, and ordinary cracked. Three men walked in. They looked young, early 20s maybe. Baseball caps turned backwards, cheap sneakers, loose hoodies with pockets deep enough to hide things. To anyone else, they were just another group of restless kids. But Sarah didn't watch their clothes, she watched their eyes. The way they swept the room too quickly. The way they didn't linger on the menu but on people, on vulnerabilities. The leader, tall, tattoos snaking up his arms, moved with an authority the other two mirrored. The shorter, muscular one positioned himself near the exit like he was casing it. The third, jittery, kept patting the inside of his jacket. Nervous hands, a dangerous kind of nervous. Sarah's breath slowed, not from fear but from recognition. She had seen this dance before, in alleys in Fallujah, in marketplaces that hid ambushes, in cities that smelled of dust and gun oil. Predators didn't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wore cheap cologne and tried to look invisible. Her hand stayed flat on her keyboard, but her body coiled. Every muscle, every nerve had shifted. Her gaze tracked them through the reflection in her laptop screen, so subtle no one watching would have noticed. Not even Mrs. Chen, still smiling politely as she asked them what they'd like. The leader ignored her. He didn't even glance at the pastries in the glass case. His eyes stopped on the young mother with the stroller, then moved to Sarah. For a moment she felt it, the cold recognition of being sized up. A calculation. What was she? A student in jeans and a sweater, hair pulled into a ponytail. Just another civilian, fragile and untrained. Easy. That's what he saw, and he was wrong. But Sarah said nothing, didn't move. The second man shifted toward the window, blocking the mother's line to the exit. The nervous one hovered near the register, eyes darting to the till. This wasn't random. They'd done this before. She could see it in the way their formation flowed. Control the space, contain the witnesses, intimidate, then escalate. The mother's hand tightened on the stroller handle. Sarah caught the subtle panic in her eyes, the way she already knew she was trapped. And Mrs. Chen, she tried to keep her voice light, but the paper trembled in her hand now. Sarah could read fear like a second language. She closed her laptop softly, almost lazily. To anyone watching, she was just done studying. To her body, it was a signal, readiness. The kind drilled in through years of training with teams who didn't forgive hesitation. Her mind split into pathways, two exits, main door blocked, kitchen door behind the counter may be viable if she got civilians moving, windows too narrow, weapons, mug, chair, laptop if she needed to break a nose, tactical advantage, none. She was one woman against three, but they didn't know that. Not yet. Nice little place you got here, old lady, the tattooed leader finally said, leaning too close across the counter. His tone wasn't friendly. It was the weight of a threat. Shame if something happened to it. Sarah's stomach tightened. That was it, confirmation. This wasn't about coffee. The nervous one's hand slipped again into his jacket. The muscular one took a deliberate half-step closer to the mother and child. Sarah caught the mother's whispered gasp, the baby stirring at the tension in the air. And just like that, Sarah knew she had seconds, not minutes, not time to weigh if maybe she was overreacting, if maybe her combat instincts were pulling ghosts from nothing. No, she had seen that look on predators before. It was a look that ended in violence if no one interrupted. But she had promised herself she wouldn't be this person again. She had promised she'd left it all behind, the fight-or-die reflex, the part of her that only knew how to neutralize threats. She had wanted silence, books, the chance to breathe. And yet, Mrs. Chen's hands were shaking. The mother's lips pressed to her baby's forehead as if to shield it with nothing but love. There are moments when a life pivots and you know it. This was hers. Sarah put her palms flat on the table, leaning forward as if stretching from a long study session. Inside, every fiber of her was preparing. This wasn't Afghanistan. This was Iraq. But the rules were the same: protect the innocent, end it quickly, survive. The tattooed man's hand dipped, metal glinting, a knife. And the world slowed. Sarah's mind stilled, calm in the way it had always been when chaos erupted. She saw angles, motions, outcomes. If he lunged left, her counter would be sharp. If he swung wild, his own force would be used against him. The room was no longer a café. It was a battlefield in miniature, every chair a barrier, every second a chance to save or lose lives. Her body shifted, small enough no one noticed but ready. He lunged. How fast could a heartbeat feel like an explosion? The knife slashed toward her chest, gleaming in the café light. Sarah moved before her mind even formed the word attack. Her chair screeched back, her body angling, and the blade cut nothing but air. In the same breath, her hand clamped around the attacker's wrist, thin, tattooed, all arrogance and no control. He hadn't expected resistance, certainly not from someone who looked like her. Momentum was his enemy now. She pivoted, pulled, used his forward rush against him. The next second, his body slammed hard into a table, wood splintering, chairs skidding out across the floor. The knife clattered away, sliding toward the counter where Mrs. Chen froze in horror. For a split second, silence. Then chaos. The nervous one, Tommy, she would later learn his name, jerked back, wide-eyed, fumbling inside his jacket. A flash of steel. A gun. His hand shook so violently Sarah knew he wasn't practiced. That made him more dangerous. Trembling fingers on a trigger were worse than steady ones. "Drop it." Her voice cut through the café, sharp, commanding, full of an authority she hadn't used in months. She sounded like the Navy again. But the boy's panic drowned reason. "Stay back, I swear I'll shoot." His voice cracked, desperation spilling out in waves. The mother whimpered, pressing herself and her baby against the window. Mrs. Chen crouched behind the counter, her breath audible, quick and shallow. Even the suited men near the door were frozen in place, as if waiting for permission to breathe. Sarah's body shifted subtly, her palms raised in a pacifying gesture but her stance angled, ready. Her voice softened, the way she had been trained to negotiate when force wasn't the only option. "Easy. No one's here to hurt you. Put it down and we all walk out of this alive." The boy's hands trembled harder. His pupils were blown wide with fear. Sarah recognized it, raw panic, the kind she had seen in young soldiers their first time under fire. She almost pitied him. Almost. Behind her, the muscular one moved, thinking her attention was elsewhere. Sarah caught him in the corner of her eye, the shift of his shoulders, the preparation to grab the mother's arm. He thought she wouldn't notice. Wrong. Her hand darted to the mug on her table, a flick of the wrist, fast and precise. Ceramic shattered against his temple. He stumbled, not down but stunned, enough for the mother to gasp and clutch her child tighter, pulling back against the wall. "Don't move." Sarah barked, her voice no longer calm but razor-edged, cutting the room in half. The leader on the ground groaned, trying to push himself up, but Sarah was there before he could find his footing. She locked her arm around his neck, swift and efficient, cutting blood flow until his body went limp, collapsing like a puppet whose strings had been cut. Unconscious. Neutralized. The boy with the gun panicked even more, backing toward the door. "I'll do it. I'll shoot. I'm not going back to prison." His hand shook so badly the muzzle wavered between Sarah and the young mother, his finger twitching dangerously close to the trigger. Sarah inhaled, steady, her own pulse under iron control. She knew this moment, the tightrope where words mattered more than fists. She adjusted her tone, softer now, human. Not soldier, not threat, but something he could grab onto. "What's your name?" The boy blinked, startled by the question. "What?" "Your name," Sarah repeated, low, calm. "What do people call you?" His lips twitched. "Tommy." "Okay, Tommy." She spoke his name gently, grounding him. "Listen to me. You don't want to do this. You don't want to carry the weight of blood on your hands. I've seen what that weight does. It'll destroy you." Tears brimmed in his eyes. "I can't go to prison. My mom, she's sick. She needs me. I can't leave her." Sarah's throat tightened for just a moment, because she believed him. He wasn't a monster, just a broken kid dragged into something bigger than he understood. And in that moment, she hated the world for making choices like his inevitable. "Tommy," she whispered, "the only way you'll see your mom again is if you put that gun down, right now." For a heartbeat, she thought he might listen. His hand dipped slightly, his breath ragged, as if reason was winning. Hope flickered in the air like a fragile flame. Then sirens screamed in the distance. Tommy's face twisted in panic. His eyes went wild, darting toward the windows where red and blue lights began to flash faintly. "No cops! I can't let them take me!" His finger pressed harder on the trigger, his voice breaking into hysteria. Sarah's body reacted before her mind could frame another word. She dove left as the shot rang out, the bullet exploding a coffee mug behind her, fragments flying like shrapnel. She rolled behind the counter, Mrs. Chen cowering beside her, the older woman's face pale, eyes wide with fear. Sarah touched her arm gently. "Stay down. This will be over soon." Footsteps scraped on the cafe floor, Tommy moving, hunting, trying to find her. His breaths came loud, uneven, like someone drowning in shallow water. Sarah crouched, shifting quietly along the counter's length. Every sound in the room painted a map in her head. The scrape of his shoe, the trembling catch of his breath, the slight rattle of the gun as his hand quivered. When his shadow fell across the end of the counter, Sarah was already behind him. Her hand shot out, seizing his wrist. She twisted, driving his arm upward just as his finger squeezed. The gun discharged into the ceiling, plaster raining down. At the same time, her knee struck his stomach, air blasting out of him in a broken gasp. His body folded, and with a practiced motion she ripped the pistol free, tossing it out of reach. "Enough," she growled, locking her arm around his throat, not to kill but to end the fight. His hands clawed weakly, but the fear had drained his strength. Within seconds, he sagged unconscious into her grip. The muscular one, half-stunned from the mug, lifted his hands quickly. "I give up. I'm done. Please don't hurt me." His voice, once cocky, was stripped of every ounce of bravado. Sarah's eyes stayed cold on him, one hand steady on Tommy's limp form. "Sit. Hands behind your head. You move, you're next." He obeyed instantly, sinking into a chair, trembling. Sirens blared louder, flashing lights cutting across the cafe windows now. Tires screeched outside. The mother sobbed softly, clutching her baby to her chest. Mrs. Chen's hands shook as she peeked over the counter, her lips whispering prayers. Sarah exhaled, finally letting her shoulders loosen. Her gaze swept the room, everyone alive, everyone safe, for now. But inside her chest something churned. Not victory, not pride, something heavier. She hadn't wanted this. She had wanted to be Sarah the student, not Sarah the soldier. She had wanted to be the woman who wrote about trauma, not the one who lived it again. And yet she couldn't regret her choice, because when it mattered, she had acted. The bell above the door burst open, police officers storming in with weapons drawn. Their shouts filled the room, demanding compliance, confusion thick in their voices as they saw 3 men on the floor and 1 woman standing calm and steady, hands raised in surrender. "I'm Sarah Martinez," she said, voice clear and composed. "They tried to rob the café, 2 unconscious, 1 surrendered, weapons on the floor." Her tone was military precise, unshaken, but inside she felt something stir, an old recognition. This wasn't the end, not for her, not now. How could calm look so unnatural after violence? The café was chaos now. The leader lay unconscious on the floor, his tattoos stark against his pale skin. Tommy slumped nearby, chest rising in uneven breaths, his weapon discarded under a table. The muscular one sat in a chair, hands locked behind his head, staring at Sarah like she was some apparition he couldn't understand. Police officers flooded in, weapons drawn, adrenaline high. Their commands overlapped, filling the air like gunfire. "Hands where I can see them. Get down on the ground. Nobody move." Sarah raised her hands slowly, palms out, her posture calm and precise. She didn't flinch at the rifles aimed her way. She had seen this before, rooms stormed, enemies subdued, innocents herded into corners. But this time she was the anomaly, a civilian in their eyes, a student, yet standing over 3 subdued criminals like she had written the script. "Name," one officer barked, eyes narrowing on her. "Sarah Martinez," she replied evenly. Her voice didn't shake, though her heart was still pounding beneath the surface. "These 3 men attempted an armed robbery. 2 are unconscious. 1 surrendered. Weapons are on the floor." The officer blinked, momentarily thrown by the clarity in her tone. He looked from her to the sprawled bodies, then back again, as if trying to fit puzzle pieces that didn't belong. You did this. Alone." She said nothing, just kept her eyes steady on his, her silence almost louder than a confession. Mrs. Chen, trembling but determined, stepped forward from behind the counter. "She saved us," the older woman said, voice breaking but fierce with gratitude. "They came to hurt people, but Miss Sarah, she stopped them, all of them." The young mother's sobs punctured the air, her baby fussing softly in her arms. She nodded rapidly, words tumbling through tears. She protected us. I don't even know how. They had knives, a gun, and then it was like watching something I didn't understand." The businessman who had slipped outside to call 911 stepped back into the doorway wide-eyed. "I saw it," he added. "From out there. She moved like she'd done it 100 times before. I've never seen anything like it." The officers exchanged glances. One holstered his weapon, his jaw tight with disbelief. Another muttered, "All 3, by herself." Sarah stayed quiet. Every instinct told her not to explain. The less they knew, the easier it would be. The military had trained her to disappear, not to shine. And yet here she was, center stage in a story she never wanted to star in. Paramedics arrived, kneeling over the unconscious men, checking pulses, securing them for transport. Tommy stirred, groaning, his eyes fluttering open. The moment his gaze landed on Sarah, his face twisted, fear, awe, something else he didn't have words for. "She's not normal," he rasped to the medic, his voice barely audible but filled with certainty. "She's not like the rest of us. She knew everything we were gonna do before we did it." The medic gave him a dismissive shrug, guiding him toward the waiting ambulance. But the words lingered, hanging heavy in the air. One of the detectives finally pushed through the crowd. Dark hair tied back neatly, a leather notebook in her hand. Her eyes were sharp, cutting through the confusion like a blade. She introduced herself briskly. "Detective Maria Rodriguez, Robbery Division." She surveyed the scene once, then let her gaze settle on Sarah. Not just glance study. The way Sarah stood, The way her breathing was controlled, her hands steady despite everything. Rodriguez approached slowly, pulling a chair from a table and setting it across from Sarah. "Mind if we talk?" she asked, though her tone left little room for refusal. Sarah lowered her arms, sat down calmly, folding her hands on the table. She met the detective's stare with one of her own, quiet but unyielding. Rodriguez leaned forward, her pen poised above the notebook. "Witnesses say you took down 3 armed men, alone. One with a knife, one with a gun. That true?" Sarah chose her words carefully, her voice level. "I acted to protect civilians. I used the environment, training, and luck." The detective's eyebrow rose slightly. "Training? What kind of training?" Silence. Sarah hesitated. She hated the taste of the truth on her tongue, hated how close it was to slipping out. But she also knew lies had their own weight, so she gave the simplest, least revealing version. Military background. Rodriguez's eyes sharpened. Military, not police, not security. 6 years, Navy, Sarah admitted quietly. Support division. It was the truth, stripped bare of context. It was her official title, the one that hid the reality of where she'd really been, of what she had really done. The detective scribbled a note. Her expression didn't change much, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of recognition. She'd seen combat vets before. She knew this wasn't just support. "You're not a normal graduate student, are you, Ms. Martinez?" Rodriguez said softly, not accusing, not hostile, just certain. Sarah didn't answer. She didn't need to. Around them, the café slowly stitched itself back together. Mrs. Chen shakily cleaned broken mugs with trembling hands. The mother finally answered her buzzing phone, telling her husband through sobs that she and the baby were safe. Police officers corralled the unconscious and handcuffed men, guiding them outside into flashing lights and waiting vehicles. But the room's center of gravity stayed on Sarah and the detective. Rodriguez tapped her pen against the notebook, then said, "I'll need you to come to the station tomorrow to give a formal statement. Tonight you're free to go," but her eyes narrowed slightly. "Something tells me this isn't the end of your involvement. These men," she gestured toward the cuffed figures, "they don't move like small-time criminals. They had formation, control. This wasn't random." Sarah's pulse tightened. She knew Rodriguez was right. She felt it in the way they entered, the way they moved. This wasn't just a robbery. Something larger simmered beneath it. But she said nothing. The detective studied her another long second before closing her notebook. "We'll talk tomorrow. Don't leave town." Sarah stood slowly, gathering her laptop, her bag, her cooling coffee. She nodded once to Mrs. Chen, who grasped her hand with tears in her eyes, whispering gratitude Sarah didn't know how to accept. Outside, the street was lined with flashing lights, curious onlookers, murmured voices. The quiet cafe had become a spectacle, the kind of story that would spread by morning like wildfire. Sarah pulled her hood up, lowering her head against the glare of it all. She hadn't asked for this attention. She hadn't wanted it. And yet, no matter how far she walked from the cafe that night, she couldn't shake the feeling pressing into her chest. She hadn't just defended a cafe. She had lit a flare in the dark, and somewhere, someone dangerous had already seen it. Why did silence always feel louder after chaos? Sarah closed her apartment door behind her and leaned against it, letting the deadbolt slide home with a quiet click. The lock should have been comforting. It was. The walls around her felt thinner than ever, as if every sound from outside seeped straight through. She dropped her bag on the couch, laptop still inside. Her coffee-stained sweater clung to her with the faint scent of smoke from the discharged gun. She wanted to shower, to scrub the cafe from her skin, but her body stayed rooted in place, her pulse still echoing in her ears. It had been hours since the robbery. The police had asked their questions. Witnesses had given their statements, but the weight of what happened refused to leave. She could still see the baby pressed against its mother's chest, the fear in Mrs. Chen's eyes, the tremor in Tommy's voice when he said he couldn't lose his mom. She had promised herself civilian life would be different, ordinary, but the truth pressed harder now than ever. You can leave the battlefield doesn't leave you. Her phone buzzed. Jessica's name lit the screen. Sarah hesitated, then answered. "Sarah," Jessica's voice came fast, panicked, high-pitched. "Oh my God, are you okay? The news is saying there was a robbery at that cafe you always go to. 3 men, guns, knives, and someone stopped them all. Please tell me you weren't there, please." Sarah closed her eyes, pressing a hand to her forehead. "I'm fine, Jess. I was there. Everyone's safe." The other end went silent for a long moment. Then Jessica whispered, "Wait, you were the one. The woman they're talking about on the news. No. Sarah, you're a grad student. You study trauma theory. You don't fight armed robbers." "It's complicated," Sarah said quietly. Jessica laughed, but it wasn't humor, it was disbelief breaking through fear. "Complicated? You're trending on Twitter, Sarah. They're calling you the cafe soldier. Reporters are already digging. People want to know who you are. This is not normal." Sarah winced. The last thing she wanted was a spotlight. Attention meant exposure. Exposure meant vulnerability. "Jess, can we talk tomorrow, please? I need some space tonight." There was a pause, softer now, her friend's worry filtering back through the static of shock. "Okay, tomorrow. But you'd better explain, because right now I feel like I don't even know who you are." Sarah hung up, throat tight. She set the phone down on the counter, but it buzzed again almost immediately, this time a different number. Unknown. Something in her gut twisted. She answered, "Martinez." The voice on the other end was sharp, familiar, commanding. "Please tell me you didn't just blow your cover in broad daylight." Sarah's breath caught. "Commander Walsh." Lieutenant Commander Patricia Walsh. Mentor. Superior. The woman who had guided her through deployments, who had seen her at her strongest and at her lowest. They hadn't spoken in months. Sarah had hoped never to hear that tone again. "How did you?" "Because your name showed up in a police report flagged by federal intelligence," Walsh cut in. "And because the FBI called me 10 minutes ago. Sarah, those men you took down weren't small time. They're connected. They're Valdez network." The name dropped like stone into her stomach. Valdez. She'd heard whispers overseas, connections between cartels, arms dealers, trafficking routes. Always shadow, never daylight. "I thought it was just a robbery," Sarah said. 3 punks looking for easy cash." "No, it was." Walsh's voice was heavy now, less reprimand, more warning. "They've been moving through your city for months, building fronts, cafes, restaurants, businesses they can launder money through. Mrs. Chen's place was a target. You didn't just stop a robbery. You disrupted their operation, and they will not forgive that." Sarah turned slowly, scanning her own apartment windows, the streetlights beyond. For the first time, her home didn't feel like hers. "Are you saying they'll come after me?" "They don't forget faces, and now yours is on the news." Walsh's pause was deliberate. "The Bureau is putting you under protective surveillance, but Sarah, be smart. Change your routine. Don't go back to that cafe tomorrow. Don't go anywhere predictable. These people play for keeps." Sarah gripped the edge of her counter, her knuckles white. "Commander, I didn't choose this." "I know," Walsh said, her voice softening slightly. "But sometimes choice doesn't matter. Sometimes the fight finds you again whether you're ready or not." The call ended, leaving silence that felt heavier than any battlefield Sarah had walked. Her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a call, it was a text. "We know who you are. We know where you live. You made a mistake today." Attached was a photo, her apartment building, taken from across the street. Sarah's chest tightened. She didn't waste a second. She grabbed the number Walsh had given her years ago, an emergency contact she'd never used. The line connected instantly. "This is Agent Thompson, FBI. "Sarah Martinez, I just received a threat, a photo of my building." We intercepted similar chatter minutes ago, Thompson said. His voice was brisk, clipped, all business. They're testing your reaction. Do not stay there. Leave now. Don't take your car. They'll be watching it. Walk 3 blocks north. There's a coffee shop. Agent Kim will be waiting outside in a blue sedan. She'll bring you in. Sarah was already moving, tossing essentials into a bag. Laptop, ID, a change of clothes. She unlocked the small metal case hidden in her closet. Inside, the sidearm she'd kept since her discharge. She had prayed she'd never need it again. Tonight she did. She loaded it quickly, checked the safety, tucked it into the waistband beneath her sweater. As she slipped out the back exit of her building, she could feel eyes watching. She'd been trained to notice when someone lingered too long, when movements didn't match the flow of pedestrians. 2 men leaned against a lamppost across the street, too casual, too focused on nothing at all. She ducked into shadows, cutting down side streets, circling twice before approaching the rendezvous. The blue sedan was there. Inside, a woman in her 30s with an expression that radiated calm authority. She stepped out, flashing credentials. "Ms. Martinez, I'm Agent Kim. Let's go." Inside the car, the hum of the city faded, replaced by the low thrum of the engine and Agent Kim's voice. Those men today weren't acting alone. The Valdez network has been running operations here for years, trafficking, weapons, laundering. What you interrupted wasn't a robbery, it was surveillance. You forced their hand, and now they'll come looking for you. Sarah stared out the window as the city lights blurred. She wanted to scream. She wanted to vanish. Instead, her voice came out steady, almost too steady. "So I'm back in it, whether I want it or not." Kim glanced at her. "You saved lives today, but you also painted a target on your back." Sarah didn't reply. She didn't need to. She already knew. The truth had followed her home, and there was no escaping it now. Why did every safe place feel like a cage? The blue sedan glided into the underground garage of a nondescript building downtown. To Sarah, it might have been just another office tower. Anonymous, quiet, unremarkable. But the reinforced doors and armed guards at the checkpoint told her otherwise. Agent Kim led her up a secure elevator to the 20th floor. Keycards, codes, biometric scans. Each layer of security made Sarah's stomach turn. She had lived this life before. Back then, it had been briefing rooms on naval bases, compounds in war zones, bunkers dug into desert hillsides. Now it was a high-rise in her own city, and somehow that felt worse. The apartment itself was simple: 2 bedrooms, plain furniture, a view of the city skyline framed by reinforced glass. It was meant to be comforting. It was. Sarah dropped her bag on the couch and scanned the room automatically, cataloging exits, blind spots, angles of fire. Old habits again. Agent Kim set a folder on the coffee table and sat across from her. "This will be your safe location until we assess the threat. 24/7 surveillance. The floor is locked down. No one comes in or out without clearance." Sarah leaned back, arms crossed. "You really think I'm safe here, after they sent me a photo of my own building?" Kim studied her, not with doubt but with the quiet assessment of someone who saw more than was said. "Safer than you were an hour ago." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Sarah asked, "Why am I really here? Why does the FBI care this much about 3 thugs who picked the wrong café?" Kim slid the folder toward her. Inside were photos, faces she half recognized, the 3 from the café. Others she had seen in the background earlier that day, men sitting at tables who had left too quickly when trouble started. Surveillance shots, license plates, connections. "The Valdez network," Kim said flatly. "They're not local punks. They run operations across state lines, trafficking, weapons, money laundering. Mrs. Chen's cafe was just one of their targets. Cash-heavy, small staff, vulnerable owner, perfect cover." Sarah flipped through the photos. Her stomach tightened when she recognized 2 of the men. "These 2, they were in the cafe this morning. I noticed them leave just before the others moved in." Kim nodded. "Spotters. They were testing the environment, making sure the timing was right. You disrupted more than a robbery, Sarah. You disrupted their whole schedule. And now, they'll know the FBI is watching. Sarah closed the folder, her jaw tight. So what does that have to do with me? Because your name hit their radar, Kim said quietly. The second your involvement was filed in the police report, it got sold to their informants. Within hours, they knew who you were, where you lived, and that you weren't just a student. They'll want answers and payback. Sarah exhaled, staring out at the glittering skyline. The city looked beautiful from here, but it felt like a battlefield disguised in neon. I didn't ask for this, she murmured. Kim's voice softened. No one does. For a while, neither spoke. The hum of the city filled the silence. Then Kim's phone buzzed. She answered, listened for a minute, her expression tightening, then ended the call. When she turned back to Sarah, her eyes held something heavier. We have a bigger problem. Sarah's pulse ticked higher. What kind of problem? One of our undercover agents, Kim said. Agent Thompson. He missed his check-in an hour ago. Last we heard, he was scheduled to meet with Valdez operatives tomorrow. But after what happened at the café, we think his cover's blown. The air in the room thickened. Sarah had never met Thompson, didn't know his face, but she knew the scenario. An agent compromised, time running out. The equation never ended well. You're saying they have him, Sarah said quietly. Kim nodded. Most likely. We traced his last signal to a warehouse complex outside the city. Heavy guard presence. Too heavy for us to wait. If they move him before dawn, we lose him and everything he knows about their operation. Sarah sat back, running a hand across her face. The pieces were fitting together too fast, too neatly. The café hadn't been random. It had been a fuse, and now the fire was burning straight toward her. So what do you want from me? She asked finally. Kim hesitated, then answered with blunt honesty. The team leader on this operation knows your background, knows what you did today. She specifically requested you as a consultant for the rescue mission. Sarah froze. I'm not active duty, I'm not even law enforcement, I'm a student now, a civilian. Kim's eyes didn't waver. You're also the reason 3 armed men are in custody tonight instead of 3 families grieving. You're trained. You've seen them up close. And whether you like it or not, you're already in this fight. The only question is if you'll stand outside it or step in and help us end it. Sarah swallowed hard, her chest tightening. She thought of Mrs. Chen, of the mother with the baby, of Tommy's cracked voice saying he couldn't lose his mom. She thought of her own past, soldiers she couldn't save, missions that ended in silence. Tell me about this team, she said finally. Kim reached for her laptop, flipping it open. A satellite image filled the screen, a sprawl of industrial warehouses near the docks. Operation set for tomorrow night, 0200, 12 agents, 4 military advisors, and the team leader, she paused. Commander Patricia Walsh. Sarah blinked, a rush of emotions colliding at once, surprise, relief, dread. Walsh, her old commander. The one voice she had trusted, the one leader she had followed without question. Kim saw the recognition. You know her. She trained me, led me, saved me more times than I can count. Sarah's voice was steady, but a flicker of something raw passed through her eyes. If Walsh is leading this, it won't be sloppy. It'll be surgical. Kim nodded. She asked for you by name. Sarah stood, walking to the window. The city lights spread endlessly, 1,000 points of life she didn't know, couldn't touch. Somewhere out there, a man was tied to a chair in a warehouse, waiting for someone to come, waiting for people like her. She pressed a hand against the glass, her reflection staring back. Not the student in a sweater, not the woman writing a thesis about trauma, but the soldier she'd tried to bury. Her voice was quiet when it came, but steady. When do I meet the team? 0800, Federal Building downtown. Kim closed the laptop, sliding it back into her bag. Try to get some rest. Tomorrow will be long. Sarah gave a faint, humorless laugh. Rest right. When Kim left, the apartment was too quiet. Sarah sat on the couch, staring at the folder, the photos, the weight of choices pressing into her chest. She thought about all the nights overseas when she'd lain awake, wondering if the fight would ever truly end. Now she had her answer. The fight doesn't end, it only changes its address. And tomorrow, it was waiting for her at a warehouse on the edge of the city. Why did walking into the federal building feel like stepping onto foreign soil? Sarah scanned her badge at the security gate, the morning air still damp with fog. The agents at the entrance studied her as if she didn't belong, as if her jeans and jacket didn't match the sterile hallways humming with government machinery. But as she passed through layer after layer of security, she recognized the rhythm. The clipped orders, the silence in the elevators, the smell of stale coffee clinging to briefing rooms. It was the same language she had lived for 6 years. Agent Kim led her to the 7th floor. When the door opened, the room hit her like a flashback. Maps spread across tables, satellite photos projected on the wall, whiteboards scrawled with call signs and code words, and around the table men and women with the same look she remembered from overseas, alert, focused, breathing war before war began. And at the center, Commander Patricia Walsh. Martinez, Walsh said, looking up from the map, her voice warm yet commanding, the same as Sarah remembered. Good to see you again. I wish it were under different circumstances. Sarah felt a tightness in her chest. Walsh hadn't changed. Her posture still straight as a blade, her presence filling the room without raising her voice. Sarah stepped forward, offering a small smile. Commander, I thought I left this behind. Walsh's eyes softened just for a moment. We all think that, until the world reminds us it isn't finished with us yet. The other agents looked on with curiosity. Who was this civilian that the commander greeted like a returning soldier? Sarah ignored their stares and took the seat Walsh indicated, leaning forward as the projector lit the wall with an aerial view of the warehouse complex. Primary objective, Walsh said, her tone crisp. Recover Agent Thompson. Secondary objective, gather intelligence and neutralize operatives. Intelligence suggests Thompson is held in Building C, northeast quadrant. Guard rotation is lightest between 0200 and 0300. That's our window. Sarah studied the layout, her brain slipping seamlessly into the old groove. She traced the approach routes, cataloged potential sniper nests, memorized choke points. It felt natural, too natural, like slipping into boots she swore she'd never wear again. She raised her hand slightly. What's our intel on the interior layout of Building C? Are we working off blueprints or recent surveillance? Walsh's eyes gleamed, the kind of recognition only a mentor could show. Good question. Blueprints are 20 years old. We're cross-referencing with thermal scans. Thompson's heat signature was detected here, 2nd floor, northeast corner, but the enemy may have altered the structure. We adapt as we go. An agent across the table frowned. And her role, he gestured towards Sarah. She's not bureau, she's not signed. What's she doing in the room? Walsh didn't flinch. She has more recent combat experience than anyone here, and she's faced these operatives already. If you have a problem with that, you take it up with me. The agent fell silent. Sarah felt eyes on her, but she kept her expression neutral. She had been underestimated before. It never bothered her, it only made her sharper. Walsh continued, assigning teams. Alpha will enter from the east, secure perimeter. Bravo from the west. Charlie team, myself, Agent Rodriguez and Martinez, will infiltrate Building C directly to extract Thompson. Alpha and Bravo hold the line. Charlie moves fast. Sarah exhaled slowly. The old rhythm was there again. Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, breach, secure, extract. But this time it wasn't a desert city or mountain village. It was home. That made it heavier. As the briefing continued, Sarah's mind flickered back to training drills. Rooms cleared in seconds, hand signals in silence, the thump of boots on concrete. She remembered nights overseas when she had rehearsed blueprints until they were etched into her bones. She remembered the times those blueprints were wrong and how chaos filled the gaps. Walsh's voice cut through her thoughts. Any questions? Sarah raised her eyes. Civilians. The room went quiet. Walsh nodded slowly. Possible. Intelligence suggests the Valdez network is using these facilities for trafficking. We've identified containers likely holding captives. If encountered, priority shifts protect and extract. Everyone understand? Heads nodded, but Sarah felt the weight settle heavier. This wasn't just a rescue. This was a reckoning. After the briefing, the team dispersed to check gear, review comms, and run drills. Walsh motioned Sarah aside into a quieter hallway. You didn't have to say yes, Walsh said softly. Sarah gave a faint laugh. Did I have a choice? There's always a choice, Walsh replied. Her eyes studied Sarah carefully. You're good at this, but I know why you walked away. You wanted peace. You wanted to help people in another way that matters. Sarah swallowed. And now I'm back here, with a gun in my hand instead of a book. Walsh's voice dropped lower. Sometimes both matter. Sometimes one makes the other possible. For a moment, Sarah let herself breathe. Walsh had always known how to balance steel with humanity. It was why people followed her. Why Sarah had. Get some rest, Walsh said finally. Tonight will test us, and Martinez, her gaze softened. You haven't lost it. I saw you in that café report. You still move like the Navy never left you. Sarah shook her head lightly. That's what scares me. The rest of the day blurred with preparation. The staging area was a warehouse near the docks, transformed into a makeshift command post. Crates stacked high created walls, tables lined with gear, radios chattering in clipped bursts. Sarah checked her equipment piece by piece: vest, headset, sidearm, rifle she hadn't touched in months but still felt like an extension of her body. Every strap tightened, every magazine loaded was a reminder. She was in this again. The woman who had sat in a cafe with textbooks now strapped on body armor in a warehouse, waiting for orders. As night fell, she sat alone on a crate, watching the city lights blink in the distance. She thought of Jessica, probably still staring at the news, wondering who her friend really was. She thought of Mrs. Chen, whose quiet cafe had become a battlefield. She thought of the young mother and her baby, faces she would never forget. And she thought of Thompson, somewhere out there, tied to a chair, maybe beaten, maybe broken, maybe counting down hours until he disappeared forever. Her chest tightened. She hated this. She hated needing violence to protect peace, but she hated more the idea of standing aside when someone else's life hung in the balance. At 2300, Walsh gathered the team for final checks. Voices dropped, nerves sharpened, radios tested, rifles loaded. The air filled with that electric tension Sarah knew too well, the silence before the storm. Walsh's voice was steady. 0200, we move. Alpha and Bravo lock down the perimeter, Charlie and Fast. Get Thompson out. Minimal noise, minimal casualties. Understood. Understood, the team echoed. Sarah's hand flexed against the grip of her weapon. The student in her whispered to run. The soldier in her whispered to stand. And for the first time in months, she felt the two collide inside her, leaving her hollow and sharp all at once. As they loaded into the black vans that would take them to the target site, Sarah leaned her head against the cool metal wall. She closed her eyes, drawing one long breath. This wasn't the life she wanted, but it was the life she knew how to survive. And tonight, survival wasn't enough. Someone out there needed saving. Why did silence always feel so violent before the breach? The convoy rolled through the dark city streets with headlights off, engines low, windows tinted black. Sarah sat in the back of the van, her weapon laid across her lap, fingers brushing against the cold steel as if to remind herself it was real. She had told herself this would be just another mission, one night, one rescue, and then she could walk away. But as the van slowed near the docks, her chest knew the truth. She was already deep inside again, and there was no walking away from what waited. Walsh's voice cut softly through the comms. 2 minutes, final check. Around her, agents tugged on straps, adjusted optics, racked slides. Sarah's movements were slower, deliberate. She had done this ritual hundreds of times. Loadout wasn't about gear. It was about mind, about convincing yourself that the chaos outside these walls could be managed if everything on your body was in its place. The van rolled to a stop. A salty wind blew in from the bay as the doors slid open. The world outside was painted in shadows and sodium lights. Warehouses loomed like sleeping giants, their corrugated walls rusted and scarred. Cranes and shipping containers rose in jagged lines, casting fractured silhouettes across the asphalt. Sarah stepped out, boots hitting the ground in silence. The night pressed against her skin. She adjusted her headset. Her heart beat slow, steady combat rhythm. Alpha in position, a voice murmured over the comms. Bravo in position, another confirmed. Charlie moving, Walsh said. The three of them, Walsh, Sarah, and Agent Rodriguez, moved along the eastern perimeter, hugging shadows, rifles raised. Sarah scanned constantly, eyes flicking between light and dark, every shift of the wind, every creak of metal. Building C loomed ahead, a square of steel and concrete, 2 stories high. A single floodlight buzzed weakly above the entrance. 2 guards smoked near the door, their posture relaxed but their rifles slung ready. Rodriguez whispered, 2 hostiles, entry point blocked. Walsh's hand signaled, quiet takedown. Sarah's breath slowed. She moved with Walsh, both peeling left, circling behind stacked shipping pallets. The night smelled of rust and oil. She could hear the guards murmuring in Spanish, voices low, careless. Walsh motioned. Sarah nodded. They broke apart, each ghosting toward a guard. Sarah slipped up behind hers, silent as breath. One hand clamped over his mouth, the other striking sharp into the side of his neck. His body went limp in seconds, lowered quietly to the ground. She felt the old reflex flow through her body like electricity. Walsh finished hers with equal precision. Both men down, no sound but the hum of the floodlight. Entry clear, Walsh whispered. Rodriguez moved to the door, tools ready. In under 30 seconds the lock gave. The heavy door creaked open, spilling stale air into the night. Inside it was darker. Rows of crates stacked high, the smell of damp concrete and motor oil. The sound of dripping water echoed faintly. Shadows shifted between the aisles, 2 more guards patrolling. Walsh held up 3 fingers, then pointed. Sarah right, Rodriguez left, Walsh center. They moved like a unit, the silence of their boots broken only by the faint scuff of fabric against steel. Sarah caught sight of the first guard as he turned a corner. His rifle swung lazily at his side. She waited until his footsteps brought him close, then stepped out, weapon raised. One sharp strike with the butt of her rifle to his temple, clean, fast, decisive. He dropped without a sound. But the second guard wasn't as careless. He turned suddenly, eyes catching movement. Oi. Sarah's weapon barked once, muffled but sharp. The bullet took him in the shoulder, spinning him down. Not dead, but out. Rodriguez's voice snapped in her ear. Contact likely alerted. The silence broke. Shouts erupted deeper in the building. Boots pounding concrete. Orders barked in Spanish. The warehouse had awakened. Move, Walsh commanded. They sprinted toward the northeast quadrant, weaving between crates. Flashlights cut through the dark now, beams slicing the air. Bullets clattered against metal as the first guards opened fire. Sarah dropped behind a crate, returning 2 controlled bursts. One hostile fell. Another ducked. Her pulse was steady, hands precise. She hated how natural it felt. Walsh's voice cut through the chaos. Martinez, stairwell left side, go. Sarah broke cover, sprinting low, sliding into the stairwell alcove as bullets sparked against steel behind her. She cleared the stairs in seconds, rifle raised, breath sharp in her lungs. Second floor. A long corridor lined with office doors. and at the far end muffled cries. She froze, a voice, weak strained English. "Help! Agent Thompson! Target located," she whispered into her comms. But before she could move, two men stepped from a doorway ahead, rifles raised. Sarah ducked as the corridor exploded in gunfire. Plaster shredded. Sparks rained. She rolled behind a doorway, returning fire in sharp, controlled bursts. One man fell. The other pressed harder, bullets chewing the wall inches from her head. Her heart hammered. Her mind split, left flank open, Walsh and Rodriguez still below, seconds ticking. She pushed a breath through clenched teeth, then moved. She burst from cover, sprinting low, firing as she closed the distance. The last hostile staggered back, weapon clattering. Sarah's shoulder hit him full force, slamming him against the wall. Her rifle jammed between them. He reached for a knife. She drove her knee into his gut, then struck his throat with the edge of her hand. He collapsed, gasping, weapon clattering to the floor. "Clear," she whispered. She moved fast to the door at the end. A heavy lock barred it. She dropped to one knee, examining. Crude padlock. She drew her sidearm, aimed, fired once. The lock shattered. She pushed inside. The room smelled of sweat and blood. Agent Thompson sat tied to a chair, face swollen, lips split, eyes barely open. His wrists bled against the ropes. He looked up at her through the haze of pain, disbelief in his eyes. "Who?" His voice cracked. "Who are you?" Sarah holstered her weapon, moving to cut the ropes. "Someone who's getting you out." The ropes fell. Thompson sagged forward, too weak to stand. Sarah hauled him up, draping his arm over her shoulder. He was heavier than she expected, his weight dragging against her, but she tightened her grip. "Charlie Team, I have Thompson," she said into her comms. "Requesting exfil route." Walsh's voice came back, calm but urgent. "Stairwells compromised. Head east, emergency ladder on the far side. Bravo will cover." Shouts echoed from below. More boots, more voices. The building was filling. Sarah pulled Thompson toward the windows, each step a battle against his weight and the urgency pounding in her chest. Bullets rattled through the walls again, shards of glass spraying as enemy fire tore into the room. She shoved Thompson down, shielding him with her body as the glass shattered above. Her shoulder burned, hot pain searing through muscle. She bit back a scream. "Not now. Not here." "Martinez," Walsh's voice snapped in her ear. "Status." "Hit," Sarah ground out. Shoulder, not fatal, still moving. She yanked Thompson back up, forcing him toward the window where the ladder hung just outside. The wind tore at them as she shoved the glass clear, leaning him against the frame. "Go," she ordered. "I can't," he stammered, half-conscious. "You don't have to." Sarah hooked his arm, guided his legs. Step by step, she forced him onto the ladder, her body braced against his weight. Bullets sparked against the wall inches from her, voices shouting closer now. She followed, her own blood dripping down her arm, her breath ragged. The ladder rattled under their combined weight as they descended into the night. At the bottom, Bravo Team was there, rifles blazing, creating a shield of fire. Strong arms pulled Thompson free, dragging him toward the waiting van. Walsh's voice rose above the storm. "Cover Martinez." Sarah dropped the last few feet, rolling hard onto the pavement. Pain flared through her shoulder, but she pushed to her feet, firing back at the shadows swarming the windows above. "Go, go, go," Walsh's voice barked. Engines roared. Van doors slammed. The convoy peeled away from the docks, gunfire fatting into the night behind them. Inside the van, Sarah slumped against the wall, Thompson beside her, barely conscious but alive. Walsh sat across from her, eyes steady, voice low. "You did it," she said. "He's alive because of you." Sarah pressed a bloodied hand against her shoulder, her chest heaving. She wanted to believe Walsh's words, but all she felt was the weight pressing deeper. Alive for now. And the war she had tried to escape was awake again. Why did victory always feel so heavy? The convoy sped through the night, Sirens absent, engines low, headlights dim. In the back of the van, Sarah pressed gauze against her shoulder, the warmth of blood seeping through. The sting was sharp, but she barely noticed it. Pain was a familiar companion. What she noticed instead was Thompson, alive, breathing shallowly beside her, his bruised face tilted toward the ceiling as if even he couldn't believe he was still here. Walsh sat across from her, helmet off now, silver strands of hair glinting faintly in the dim light. She said nothing for a long time, only watched Sarah with that steady commander's gaze. It wasn't judgment. It wasn't even pride. It was recognition. Two soldiers bound by the knowledge of what it costs to bring someone home. When the van finally stopped at the federal building's underground entrance, medical staff swarmed in, pulling Thompson out first, then reaching for Sarah. She tried to wave them off. "I'm fine," she muttered. One medic frowned at the blood staining her sleeve. "Fine. You've got a bullet hole through your shoulder." "I've had worse." Walsh cut in, her tone final. "Patch her up now." Sarah didn't argue. Not because of the pain, but because Walsh's voice carried the weight of command she still couldn't ignore. Hours blurred together after that. Sterile rooms, stitches, questions she half answered, reports she signed without reading. Somewhere in the background, Thompson's voice rasped through debriefs, recounting everything he'd learned about Valdez before they caught him. His words painted a picture darker than Sarah wanted to see: trafficking routes, weapons shipments, politicians with dirty ties. The café had been just one thread in a web that stretched farther than anyone in the room wanted to admit. By dawn, the mission was already being written into reports, filed under victories and statistics. But Sarah sat alone in the safe house again, staring at the city skyline through glass that reflected her tired eyes. Her arm was bound, her body sore, but it wasn't the wound that kept her awake. It was the faces. Mrs. Chen, smiling with gratitude that felt too heavy to hold. The young mother, clutching her child like the world was fragile glass. Tommy, whispering that he couldn't lose his mom. And now Thompson, pulled from the jaws of something dark, alive because she'd picked up the rifle again. But at what cost? The knock at the door came soft but firm. Sarah turned. Walsh stepped inside carrying 2 mugs of coffee. She set one down in front of Sarah, then took the chair opposite. "You should be resting," Walsh said. Sarah gave a faint, tired laugh. "So should you." They sat in silence for a while, the city waking behind them. Traffic murmured below, sunlight creeping between buildings, painting the skyline gold. Finally Walsh spoke. "You saved him." Sarah shook her head slowly. "We saved him. Alpha Bravo you, it wasn't just me." "Maybe not," Walsh's eyes softened. "But you carried him out when no one else could have. You put yourself between him and death. Again. You know what that means." Sarah stared into her coffee, the steam curling like smoke. "That I haven't changed as much as I thought." Walsh leaned forward, her voice gentle but unyielding. "It means the part of you that swore to protect, no matter what, never left. You can call it soldier, sailor, whatever you want. But it's who you are, Sarah. And it's not weakness, it's strength." Sarah swallowed hard, her chest aching with the truth she'd tried so long to bury. She had wanted to be someone else. A student. A researcher. Someone who healed instead of fought, but maybe those weren't opposites. Maybe they were 2 sides of the same scar. "Commander," Sarah whispered, "I don't want to live in war anymore." "You don't have to." Walsh's gaze held her steady. "But don't mistake peace for silence. Sometimes peace comes because someone stood when no one else would. You did that. And you'll keep doing it in your own way. In classrooms, in research, in life. Not because you're chasing war, but because you can't ignore people who need you." Sarah's eyes burned, though no tears fell. She let the words sink deep, the way Walsh's words always had. Not orders, not demands, just truth. Hours later, she walked out of the federal building, her arm bound, her bag slung over her good shoulder. The reporters clustered outside shouted her name, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. "Miss Martinez, Are you the café soldier? Did you kill those men yourself? Are you working with the FBI? She didn't answer, she didn't stop. She moved through them with quiet steps, her hood pulled low. She had no need for their spotlight, no craving for their headlines. On the street corner, she paused. The city moved around her, ordinary people sipping coffee, rushing to work, holding hands, laughing. None of them knew how close darkness had come to swallowing them. None of them knew her name. And that was how she wanted it. She walked to the cafe that started it all. Mrs. Chen was there, sweeping the steps, her smile tired but bright when she saw Sarah. "You shouldn't be here," Mrs. Chen said softly. "It's not safe." "Neither is life," Sarah replied, almost smiling. Mrs. Chen reached out, squeezing her hand. "Thank you." Sarah held her gaze for a moment, then slipped inside. The tables were the same. The window light golden again. A mother with a baby sat near the corner. Different mother, different baby. But the image pressed something deep in Sarah's chest. She sat down at her old booth, back to the wall, eyes on the door. A cup of black coffee rested warm in her hands. She didn't need to explain. She didn't need to announce who she was or what she had done. She simply existed, soldier, student, survivor, all of it. And as she sat there, the city humming outside, one truth settled into her like steady breath. Sometimes strength is loud. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.